Alright, gotta make sure my pen's working here. Yeah, okay, good. I ran into some trouble there a minute ago. Alright, so I left you with Roosevelt and Churchill having met in August of 1941 off the coast of Canada. I told you that Churchill came over to the United States after Pearl Harbor to guarantee that America, wouldn't lose sight of the German first strategy, okay, as expressed in War Plan Rainbow 5. So Churchill comes over to the United States, spends 2 or 3 weeks at the White House, where he supposedly sees the ghost of Abraham Lincoln. And the Americans are like, yes, no, we'll stick with the Europe First strategy. However, because of the emergency situation in the Pacific, we do send men, airplanes, ships to the Pacific. So even with the Europe First strategy, it calls for a defensive action in the Pacific. You need a certain amount of resources just to even have a defense. So largely during the first half of 1942, we are pouring, a lot of men into the Pacific, but our eye is always on Germany. Okay? So I already looked at this slide, and we ran out of time. The big picture was taken aboard a ship off the coast of Canada. Sorry. We're all a little edgy right now. And I told you about the Atlantic Charter. The little picture, I didn't get to this. The little picture is taken later at a place called Casablanca. Okay. I was going to give it its own slide, and the file was small. I said, screw it. I just stuck it over to the side of this one. Okay. So what's that picture? The small picture is taken in January of 43. So what's happened between 41 and 43? Okay. Or the beginning of 42 when Churchill was at the White House. Well, of course, that's the invasion of North Africa. So let me go to that slide. Okay, so we ran into a technical glitch there while changing slides, so the narrative may seem a little disjointed, even more so than normal. What's changed for the 1943 conference is the invasion of North Africa, which is called Operation Torch, as seen there on the map, took place in November of 1942. November 8th, if I recall. Don't quote me on that. And what's happened is the British are fighting the Italians in Egypt. Now, Egypt is off this map. It would be to the right of Libya over the little picture of yours truly. Okay. The Italians, the English, and their Commonwealth allies were defending the Suez Canal. The Italians, of course, wanted to regain control of the Mediterranean, shades of the old Roman Empire. The English are doing pretty well against the Italians, and so Hitler sends in some German troops to help the Italians out. And under the Germans kind of taking control, the Germans and Italians are doing pretty good against the English. And so there's this back and forth thing going on as the two sides vie for control of the area, all of which is happening a little bit off of this map. Okay? So the idea was to land where all these blue arrows are, okay, that you see on the map. Okay? Where the resistance, see, this is French Morocco. So the resistance that you'll see is going to be from French troops. Okay. The French don't necessarily want to fight the Americans, but they're in kind of this rock between a rock and a hard spot. The Germans are in the northern part of France. They've occupied part of France. The remainder part of France is under a government known as the Vichy government, and they've signed a peace treaty with Germany. Okay? If the French just step aside and let the Americans and British walk ashore, the Germans could perceive that as the French wanting to re-enter the war. So technically the Americans are invading, so there's combat between French troops and American troops, but the French troops, their heart really isn't in it in most cases. And so the Americans get ashore with, there are some casualties in this fighting, but the French rather quickly give up fighting. Okay, so here is the plan. Okay. Uh, American troops head east. Actually, it would be more, I guess, this way along the coast. And meanwhile, British troops in the west would launch an offensive and come this way. And the idea was to catch the Germans in the middle and drive the Germans and the Italians out of North Africa. Okay, so we land in North Africa in November. Okay, we don't actually hit German troops hard until the end of January, early part of February. Okay, most of it's just riding across this vast bit of geography that's Africa. Okay, let me erase these red lines. All right. So in January of '43, after the successful invasion of Africa, Roosevelt and Churchill meet at Casablanca, which is on the map right here. Okay, Casablanca is right there. Okay, to talk about what to do next. Now, if I recall, I think they invited Stalin to this meeting, if memory serves me correctly. But Stalin was kind of busy at the moment with trying to deal with the German invasion of the Soviet Union, and Casablanca is a long way. He would have had to cross some hostile areas, so he couldn't make it. Okay? But Churchill and Roosevelt sit down, and they come up with some agreements. Okay. Now, at the time, there had been talk of maybe trying to invade Europe in 1943. Okay? We'll talk more about that when we get to the Tehran conference. Okay? Stalin desperately wants a second front. He wants the Americans and the British fighting the Germans big time to help take pressure off of the Soviet Union, because the Soviet Union is bearing the brunt of this war at this point in time. Now, there had been emergency plans for a small invasion in '42 for details. It was like an emergency plan if all else, some particular parameters had hit. Won't you bore you with the details? But there was talk that maybe we could invade Europe in 1943. And well, now we're in the beginning of 1943 in January. And it's not looking real good. It's going to take time to get enough troops, to get enough ships. We're still dealing with the U-boat menace, okay? And so things are looking, pretty iffy for '43. Now, what's eventually going to happen, okay, is the Allies, the Americans and the British, okay, will eventually bottle up, push the Germans into this little area right here, okay? This is like in May. Some of the Germans are able to get away over, and Italians are able to get away over here to Sicily. You can take them on boats and stuff. But we do capture a large number of prisoners in this area. Some of these men got to come to prisoner of war camps in the United States. Some ended up in Texas, where they got to pick cotton for the rest of the war. I guess they figured if you could stand the heat of North Africa, you could probably survive the heat of Texas in the summer. Right? So, where are we going with this, you're wondering? Well, with the exodus of the Germans and Italians from North Africa has been freed from Axis troops. Okay, which leaves us, though, with a large number of Allied troops in North Africa. So what are you going to do with them? Okay. Well, if you want to invade Europe in 1943, you could certainly use these troops, but you'd have to move them back up to like England. Okay? There's only so many ships available. There's only so many ships floating on the ocean. All right? If you try to move the army back up to England to get ready for an invasion, that means those ships aren't moving troops from the United States to England. Okay? Now, you can't just let the army sit in North Africa. They're just going to eat up the supplies, get fat, lazy, and lose their edge. You need to do something with them. And so the decision is made, since the army's already here, and they probably talked about this at Casablanca, is why not go ahead and invade Sicily? Because the army's already here anyway. Why not go over to Sicily and capture Sicily? Okay? So that's what they decide to do. Okay? So in late spring, early summer, the Allied forces invade Sicily. Okay? But the setting up to do this operation pretty much effectively finishes off any hopes of invading Europe in 1943. Now, Stalin, of course, desperately wants the second front. After the Allies capture Sicily, next slide, they decide, let's go to Italy. Okay? Now, pause here. Get the little blue spiral of Microsoft death. Okay, it's gone. We have an army in Sicily that has just driven the Germans out. Now, a lot of the Germans and Italians escape over to Italy proper because it's a very narrow little strait here. They can just go across on ships. And we still have troops in Africa. So the decision is made to attack Italy. Okay? Not that Italy is anyone's biggest concern. Okay, Mussolini doesn't worry us like Hitler does. We've got an army in the area. Okay, and sometimes when you have a big list of things to do, you've got like the most important things, but sometimes there's a little thing on the list, and you say, you know what, let me knock this off just so I can have the psychological boost of getting rid of one thing. And so we make the decision to invade Italy. So in September of 1943, Allied forces invade Italy. You can see the arrows there on the map. Okay? Now, the Germans can read a map. They know the Italians are kind of wishy-washy. When the Allies invade Italy, it triggers a crisis in the Italian government, and Mussolini is removed from power. Okay, so Mussolini's out. The king, basically kicks him out as prime minister, to put it simply. But the Germans, if you go far enough up the Italian peninsula, you could eventually get into Europe proper. The Germans can read a map. So the Germans have sent German divisions into Italy to prevent Allied forces from advancing north and maybe eventually getting into France that way. Okay. So the problem is Italy is very slender there. It doesn't give a lot of room to maneuver. It's very mountainous, so the terrain favors the defense. Okay. And so the Allied effort in Italy, which is truly an Allied effort. I mean, there's Canadians and Australians and Americans, English and Free French troops, Polish troops fighting in Italy get bogged down. Okay? And if they keep heading north, putting pressure, they eventually will capture Rome in 1944. But at the end of World War II, there are still Allied troops fighting in Italy against the German defenders. So this slugfest in Italy continues from September 43 all the way until the end of the war. And it does tie up a certain number of German troops. Okay? But it's not the big major second front that Stalin's looking for. Okay? And I'm coming up near the end of my time with them, so I'll stop with this slide and we'll jump into another one.